Hello and welcome to Not Very Scary Stories. Also, welcome to our first ever special Friday the 13th episode, and happy Friday the 13th. Before I really introduce this episode, I want to let everyone in personally for a minute. I'm someone who has several outlets of entertainment that I enjoy putting out for people. I'm not going to shout those out, but what I can tell you is, lately this has become one of my most successful projects ever. We're soon to cross 2,000 downloads or listens. Thank you guys for the support. I can't thank you enough, really. Now, this episode will have stories from the internet. Be sure to leave a sub, follow, or whatever you can on whatever platform you're on. Also, be sure to leave a review so people will know to listen in as well. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for the support thus far on all platforms you can find us on, including YouTube. I'd also like to remind everyone that if you have any scary stories or experiences you'd like to share, email me at notveryscaryent@gmail.com and tell me how you'd like to be credited. I'm Zenith Dark Sky, and I'll be your host tonight. Enjoy. The first story is Black-Eyed Kid, posted on r/ghost stories by user/swamp_puppy. This is not my story, but a story from a friend's great-grandfather. I have gotten permission to tell this story on here. This story takes place during the late summer in the 1960s in Osceola, Iowa, which was a very small farming community. My friend's great-grandpa, Bob, owned a farm out there. He had acres of corn, wheat, potatoes, etc. But corn was his main crop, so he had a huge cornfield. It was around 2 a.m., and his grandfather couldn't sleep, so he went outside to get some fresh air. When outside, he noticed something that looked like a child walking around him in the cornfield. So Bob ran back inside and grabbed his double-barrel shotgun and woke the farmhand for backup. They combed through the cornfield in an attempt to find whatever was running around out there. After a while, they still couldn't find anything. So Bob told the farmhand to go back inside while he stayed on the porch to watch his cornfield. Then, he looked at the gravel road between his yard and the fence line that led to the cornfield. And standing on the road was a little girl, around 6 years old or so. And she was wearing a white dress that made her look like she had just gotten out of church. Bob thought that his mind must have been playing tricks on him, so he tried to lay down on the couch to rest, but also still stay somewhat alert. However, not even a minute after he laid down, he heard a knock on the screen door. He walked up to the door and slightly cracked the main door open. He saw the little girl and asked, "May I help you?" The little girl said, "Mister, I'm lost and I don't know where my parents are. Can I come in the house and use your telephone?" Bob felt uneasy and told her that he could get her a glass of water and he can call her parents for her if she gave him the number. But he didn't feel comfortable letting her inside. He felt something off about the little girl. However, the little girl insisted on being the one to call and talk to them. And Bob said, "Young lady, it's 2 a.m. and I don't feel comfortable letting a stranger into the house, little girl or not." The little girl stated, to get agitated, and said, "I'm not leaving until you let me in to use your phone." Startled, Bob told the little girl that he was going to call the police to come pick her up, so they could keep her safe and find her parents. He closed the door to go and call the police, and he heard somebody punch the door like a grown man. He walked back and cracked the door open again, but when he looked, he realized that it was the little girl that punched the door. But when he looked at her this time, she didn't have any eyes. Instead, she had pitch black orbs instead of eyes, and she said in a deep voice, "Let me in." So Bob grabbed his shotgun and pointed it at the little girl and told her no and to go away. After this, the little girl looked right into the barrel and then backed up at Bob, smiled smugly at him, and giggled, and then she ran back into the cornfield and disappeared. The next story is titled, "I used to work at Riggs Truck Stop. Here's why I quit last night." Posted by Kessel the Viking on r/scary stories. Alright, let me start by saying I don't believe in paranormal stuff. I do, however, believe in unexplainable phenomena, and that could be anything, including what happened at the truck stop I used to work at. It was an ordinary, boring night at Riggs. The owner's name was Daryl Riggs, and I guess he liked the similarity with Riggs like Big Riggs Truck Stop. I was a cashier, but I also stocked the shelves, cleaned the windows, changed out the trash bins, and ate my fair share of truck stop food. When I was first hired, Daryl told me that the cameras were in place, but none of them worked, so I figured I could eat as long as it wasn't a noticeable amount. Anyway, that night, I was falling asleep at the register. It was probably around 1 a.m. I worked the graveyard shift, and it was deader than roadkill. I hadn't seen someone come through for a couple hours, and not even the truckers sleeping in the parking lot came inside. The faint but annoying music over the speakers was lulling me to sleep, despite its droning tone. Headlights flashed outside and woke me up. When I looked through the window, I saw a semi rolling past the side of the building. It went all the way around the back and came to a stop on the opposite side. The truck stop had an almost complete panorama of windows, which made it nearly impossible for me to miss anything fishy. Semi was odd. It had a gray tractor, the cab, and it was hauling a tanker. Normally, that wouldn't be that odd, but I didn't recognize the strange branding on the side. It said, Kerosene Transports. The logo was a hand gripping some kind of bone. The truck didn't have as many lights as I usually see on the big rig, and as I watched the driver get out, he seemed in a hurry. I stepped away from the side door where he parked and walked to the register. I assumed the whole transaction would be quick and painless. The man barreled past the counter towards the back near the coolers. I caught a couple details about him as he breezed by. First of all, he was short and stocky. Secondly, he was wearing a gray and light blue plaid shirt with a few red blotches on it. I still hadn't got the best look at his face, but he was wearing a black hat, forward-facing, with the same truck logo on it. He spent an awfully long time near the coolers. I almost asked if he needed assistance, but he swiftly came back with a bag of ice. Now I could see the true urgency in his eyes. He was sweating profusely, and his eyes were bloodshot. He had a large, bushy beard with patches of hair missing. He still hadn't engaged with me, and he spent some time perusing the pocket knives. Eventually I asked, "Anything I can help you find?" He shot up as if he didn't know I was there the entire time and stammered as he spoke. Yeah. Can I get one of these knives?" he asked while pointing his dirt-covered finger to the display case. "Sure, which one?" I asked calmly. That one right there. The one with the wolf." He was visibly shaking. It appeared he hadn't slept for a long time. I opened the case and grabbed the knife, but before checking him out, I asked, "Is everything all right tonight?" He stared directly at me for about 5 seconds before looking back down at the counter. Yep. Just a long night." It was hard to believe him, but he wasn't the first strange encounter I'd ever had at the truck stop. "Right on. So just a knife in the ice?" Yeah, wait!" he suddenly shouted before slamming his palms against the counter. "I forgot something," he added while turning around to waddle into one of the aisles. I tried to get a glimpse of what he was looking for, but he returned almost as soon as he left. He all but threw a package of Skittles on the counter before turning his gaze to me. "All set now?" I asked quietly. That should be it," he answered softly with a vocal tremble. "Cool, that'll be $49.63, cash or credit." "How much?" he asked loudly. $49.63? You're buying a knife, man. That's not some cheap souvenir. You've got ice and Skittles as well," so he seemed to calm down. Yeah, that makes sense." Then he pulled a wallet out and produced a $50 bill. He handed it to me and said, "Keep the change." "Sure thing. Do you want a bag?" I asked quickly. No bag," he said before gathering his things up in his arms and beginning to walk away. "Well, have a good night. I take it you're not resting for the night?" He stopped briefly and said, "I can't stay. No time. I need to keep moving." He sounded solemn, but I couldn't put my finger on why. I slowly stepped out from behind the counter to watch the trucker leave. It gave me peace of mind to know who came and went, so I went to see him either stay or leave, but saw something I could have never expected to see. The trucker had somehow unlatched the back of the tanker, and the latch was up. He threw the bag of ice into the back and then acted as if he was startled by something. Whatever it was, it made him run to the front of the truck for a time. While he was up there, I watched a body pull itself out of the back and onto the ground. It was missing the lower half of its body and had no clothing. Despite that fact, I couldn't recognize any discernible features. The body quickly pulled itself under the tanker, and it was just as the trucker reappeared to seal the latch. I couldn't bring myself to say anything because, quite frankly, I was in shock. The trucker turned and looked at me before once again running to the front of his truck, shifting into gear and driving away. And the body was nowhere to be seen. Not sure how I missed it, but it managed to disappear. Well, unless it was some kind of exhausted hallucination. I stood at the side door for a few minutes trying to process what happened. Eventually I turned around and headed back to the counter to take my post. The Eagles were playing over the radio, and their mainstream hit Hotel California was bringing me to that tiresome state, not because the music is boring. If anything, it was peaceful. Unfortunately, I can't just sleep when I was working at Riggs, even if nothing is happening work-wise. The sensation of needing to use the bathroom suddenly arose, and I swiftly dismissed myself. However, just as I was about to push through the door, I saw a trail of something on the tile floor. It dragged from the side door to the storage room, and upon close inspection, it was blood, albeit congealed and old. There was a handprint on the door that went outside and another on the storage room door. I stared down the short hall that leads to storage and listened. Something was rummaging through the shelves. The urge to use the bathroom left me and was replaced with that feeling you get when you turn off the light in an old basement. I took 2 steps down the hall and the rummaging stopped, prompting me to stop as well. Then I heard a dragging sound like shoes scuffing against the floor. I realized far too late that I was in imminent danger, and just as the thought entered my mind, the door to the storage room began to creak open. My instincts told me to run, and so I did. I ran to the coolers and hid in the frigid stocking room behind them. Probably wasn't my best choice, but I had no idea what awaited me beyond that door, and abandoning the register could lead to the place being robbed. I tried to peer through the cooler glass in the store, but I didn't have that good of an angle on the hallway or the side door. But I wouldn't need one because, unbeknownst to me, my adversary had already made its way to the front of the coolers. I caught movement in my peripheral vision. As I looked down, I almost yelled, which would not have been ideal. It was the body, the one that crawled out of the back of the tanker truck, and it was seething. The body was deteriorated and in complete shambles. Feasibly, it shouldn't have been able to move at all, but it was dragging itself along the ground with ease. It had wispy strands of hair on a decomposing scalp, empty eye sockets, fingers with the bones exposed, no legs, and deep gashes across its entire back. It slowly raised its head and turned to face me. I wasn't sure why I was worried about whether it could see me or not, but I still hoped it couldn't. It opened its disheveled mouth and snapped its teeth together in the air while appearing to sniff. I remained still and shaking, both from the cold and from my terror. The creature then turned away from the coolers and began to drag itself back towards the side door, or at least in the direction of it. I moved to a place where I could safely watch it without making as much noise as possible. It gradually made its way to the side door, but by the time it reached it, its body was too low for me to see. However, I was able to see the door swing open slowly before closing shortly after. I waited, freezing for a good 10 minutes for any signs of it before leaving the coolers. As soon as I thought the coast was clear, I left and immediately called the police. I called my boss as well, who didn't answer. The police arrived and were understandably skeptical, but that was only until they watched the security footage. They clearly saw what I had and were equally terrified and confused. A crime scene investigator came and examined the blood trail. They said while it was human blood, it had something else in it. Something they had never seen before. The police also told me that the trucking company didn't exist. The one on the side of that semi. They asked if I could have possibly been mistaken, but I assured them of my certainty. I was able to give them details of the driver, but they weren't enough for them to go on, and without a license plate, they couldn't track the truck. Needless to say, I quit that night. That thing may have left the truck stop, but that doesn't mean it isn't lurking somewhere nearby. The police did search with a dog, but the results were inconclusive. I wasn't going to wait around to see if it came back. I'm still not sure if that trucking company and what it was actually delivering. If that living corpse was anything to go by, then I'm sure it was nefarious in nature. If you see Riggs' truck stop, either avoid it or stay for only a short time. I won't be there to protect you, and I probably wouldn't do a very good job either. Oh, and if you ever see kerosene transports on the side of a semi, stay far away from it.